Love history? Subscribe and explore the stories that shaped our world.
In the middle of the 19th century, the mighty Austrian Empire found itself standing at a historical crossroads, battered by external defeats and internal discontent. The empire had faced a severe blow to its prestige and territorial integrity after losing its dominion over northern Italy in 1859, followed by a crushing defeat at the hands of Prussia in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. This latter defeat definitively excluded Austria from German affairs and dissolved the German Confederation, forcing the imperial government in Vienna to urgently seek a way to retain its great power status. Simultaneously, the Kingdom of Hungary, which had launched a massive but ultimately failed war of independence against Habsburg rule in 1848, was demanding the restoration of its historic constitution and self-government. Realizing the sheer necessity of survival, Emperor Franz Joseph I negotiated the historic Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867. This agreement officially transformed the Habsburg domains into the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, creating a unique dual monarchy. Under this new system, the empire was split into two co-equal sovereign states, Cisleithania, representing the Austrian lands, and Transleithania, representing the Kingdom of Hungary. At the heart of this real union was Emperor Franz Joseph himself, who wore two crowns simultaneously as the Emperor of Austria and the Apostolic King of Hungary. Though each half of the empire maintained its own separate parliament, prime minister, and citizenship, they were bound together by unified diplomatic and defense policies. For these crucial functions, common ministries of foreign affairs, war, and finance were established under the direct authority of the monarch. The decades following the 1867 Compromise witnessed significant economic modernization. Railroads expanded into once remote regions, and capitalist modes of production began to take root. The dual system allowed for an economic division of labor. The Austrian half, particularly around Vienna and Bohemia, excelled in the manufacturing industries of the Second Industrial Revolution, while Hungary emerged as a powerhouse of agriculture and the food industry, becoming the world's second largest flour exporter. While this constitutional balancing act successfully resolved the immediate friction between the Austrians and the Hungarians, it effectively ignored the aspirations of the millions of other citizens living within the empire's borders. This oversight would soon reveal the deep complexities of a realm defined by its stunning diversity. By 1910, Austria-Hungary was the second largest country in Europe by geographic area and the third most populous, home to nearly 52 million people. It was one of the most ethnically and linguistically diverse empires in human history. A true mosaic of peoples, the empire's population was composed of Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Poles, Ruthenians, Romanians, Croats, Serbs, Slovaks, Slovenes, and Italians. However, the political power remained highly disproportionate. The German-speaking Austrians and the Hungarians, who together made up less than 43% of the empire's total population, held the reins of dominance. This disparity turned language into a proxy for ethnicity and one of the most fiercely contested issues in Austro-Hungarian politics. In the Austrian half of the empire, the Basic State Act of 1867 theoretically promised equal rights to all ethnicities and the inviolable right to use one's native language in education and public life. Yet implementation was deeply flawed, leading to fierce disputes, most notably in Bohemia, where Czech speakers continuously fought for equal standing with German. In the Kingdom of Hungary, the situation for minorities was even more restrictive. Despite passing a liberal law on nationalities in 1868, the Hungarian government increasingly pursued a policy of Magyarization, actively reducing the use of non-Hungarian languages in schools and public offices. Amidst these political and ethnic frictions, the empire experienced a profound cultural and intellectual blossoming, most visible in the imperial capital, Vienna. The demolition of Vienna's old city walls paved the way for the Ringstrasse, a grand boulevard lined with monumental public buildings designed in the historicist style. Architects used idealized historical styles to express the function of each building. The parliament was built in Hellenistic style to reflect the birthplace of democracy, while universities and museums took on Renaissance forms. The empire also benefited from a thriving Jewish population, which made up about 5% of the total demographic, but played a massive role in commerce, medicine, law, and the cultural life of cities like Vienna and Budapest.
Having been forced out of the geopolitical spheres of Germany and Italy, the dual monarchy shifted its imperial gaze southward to the Balkans. This mountainous region was in constant tumult, filled with nationalistic movements demanding independence from the declining Ottoman Empire. This southward shift put Austria-Hungary on a direct collision course with the Russian Empire. While Russia positioned itself as the ideological protector of all Slavic and Orthodox Christians, Austria-Hungary sought to absorb these diverse populations under the bureaucratic control of Vienna, actively opposing Russian expansion and blocking Serbian ambitions to create a South Slav federation. In 1878, following the Congress of Berlin, Austria-Hungary was granted the right to occupy and administer the Ottoman provinces of Bosnia and Herzegovina, a predominantly Slavic region. To further secure its position against potential Russian aggression, Vienna forged a defensive alliance with Germany in 1879, which later expanded to include Italy. For 30 years, the occupation of Bosnia remained a tense balancing act, but in 1908, Emperor Franz Joseph unilaterally annexed the territory. This annexation sparked the Bosnian crisis, an international uproar that infuriated Russia and the Kingdom of Serbia, drastically escalating geopolitical tensions. Domestically, the Austro-Hungarian military high command was preparing for the worst. Long before any shots were fired, the army began drafting emergency legislation that amounted to the militarization of society. Viewing the empire's own constitutional state and its non-German nationalities with deep suspicion, the military leaders laid the groundwork for an authoritarian war regime. They planned to suspend civil rights, implement military courts for civilians, and heavily exploit the population's labor and resources in the event of a conflict.
On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, visited Sarajevo. During his motorcade journey, he and his wife Sophie were shot and killed by Gavrilo Princip, a Yugoslav nationalist of Serbian ethnicity. This assassination fatally inflamed the existing ethnic and religious hostilities in the region. In the immediate aftermath, Austro-Hungarian authorities encouraged violent anti-Serb riots in Sarajevo and other cities. Thousands of prominent Serbs were imprisoned, hundreds were executed, and a special militia was established to systematically persecute the Serb population. In Vienna, powerful figures such as Army Commander Franz Conrad von Hötzendorf saw the assassination as the perfect excuse to launch a preventive war against a resurgent Serbia. After securing full support from their German allies, the Austro-Hungarian government issued the July Ultimatum, a list of 10 severe demands designed to be rejected by Serbia. When Serbia accepted all but one of the demands, Austria-Hungary used the single rejection as a pretext to declare war on July 28, 1914. Within weeks, the complex web of European alliances was activated, plunging the continent into World War I. However, the initial military reality for Austria-Hungary was catastrophic. The invasion of Serbia in 1914 ended in disaster, with the loss of 227,000 men by the end of the year without taking any territory. On the Eastern Front, the army suffered equally devastating defeats against the massive Russian Empire, leading to the loss of key fortresses and staggering casualties. On the home front, the dictatorial military regime planned before the war was ruthlessly enacted. The military authorities suspended civil rights and placed large parts of the civilian administration under dictatorial control. As the war dragged on, food became incredibly scarce. Inflation wiped out the savings of the middle class, and women and children were forced into exhausting manual labor to support the collapsing agricultural sector. Furthermore, the military systematically targeted non-German minorities, such as the Ruthenians in Galicia, subjecting them to arbitrary hostage takings, internments, and executions under the guise of military necessity.
In November 1916, the aged Emperor Franz Joseph died after ruling for nearly 68 years,
passing the crown to his grandnephew, Karl I. The new emperor inherited a realm that was rapidly disintegrating. Karl attempted to remove pro-German officials and made secret peace overtures to the Allies to save his empire, but these efforts failed, largely due to Italy's territorial demands and Karl's resulting loss of credibility. By the autumn of 1918, the economic situation was absolutely desperate, and mass starvation loomed. Morale in the army evaporated, and violent strikes and mutinies erupted across the empire. Allied leaders, notably U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, had initially proposed autonomy for the empire's minorities, but by late 1918, the Allies officially supported full independence for the Czechs, Slovaks, and South Slavs. In a last, desperate bid to save the state, Emperor Karl issued the People's Manifesto on October 16, 1918, proposing to transform the Austrian half of the empire into a federal union of nations. But it was too late. The national councils had already begun acting as provisional governments. By the end of October, the Czechs and Slovaks declared the independent state of Czechoslovakia, and the Southern Slavs proclaimed their own new state. On October 31st, the Hungarian government formally repudiated the 1867 compromise, officially severing the dual monarchy. Finally, on November 11, 1918, Emperor Karl relinquished his participation in state affairs, marking the definitive end of Habsburg rule. The legal death of the empire was sealed by the treaties of Saint-Germain and Trianon. These treaties drastically redrew the map of Central Europe, reducing Austria and Hungary to small landlocked republics. Hungary famously lost 72% of its historic territory and millions of ethnic Hungarians to neighboring states. The ashes of the Austro-Hungarian Empire gave birth to new sovereign nations, including Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, while heavily expanding Poland, Romania, and Italy. The legacy of Austria-Hungary is one of profound contradiction. It was an empire capable of tremendous economic growth and unparalleled cultural achievements, yet it was ultimately doomed by its inability to grant true political equity to its mosaic of peoples. In its dying breath, the empire unleashed a devastating global war and left behind fractured borders and nationalist resentments that would haunt the newly drawn map of Europe for the rest of the 20th century.